At 6:02 a.m., socks on coffee. Not even brewed, I opened my door, and a woman told me I couldn't live in my own house. She said it like a judge handing down a sentence, chin-high clipboard ready, like she'd practiced in the mirror. And for a second, I thought I was still dreaming. 30 seconds later, she rattled off my work time. My wife's shift change, the exact coffee shop she hits when the sun is barely up, like our lives were a schedule she owned. That was the first time my spine went cold on Sycamore Lane. Not the last, and yeah, that happened. My name is Jake. My wife is Nora. We spent years stacking overtime and takeout containers to buy that blue Colonial on the corner wraparound porch. Big sycamore that made the whole street look like a postcard. The title search said HOA, and that was the point. We wanted peace, not a committee telling us the color of our porch light. The woman introduced herself like a CEO to an intern. Marla, president of the Ashford Lakes HOA. White polo khaki capris visor voice that could slice fruit. And she said we were under her jurisdiction. Shadow lines from the tree. Sightline standards. A $600 fine for the way sunlight touched my siding. And I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because disbelief. Short circuits you for a second. I showed her the folder clean title. No covenants. Ashford Ridge, not Ashford Lakes, and she just tilted her head. Told me the lines were annexed last quarter, and I would learn. Then waved in two clipboard ladies and a nervous guy named Stuart, who tried to disappear into his polo. He handed me an envelope labeled Violation 001 inside, were charges that felt like parody. Improper vehicle position, tree encroachment lawn, irregularity. And before I could decide whether to yell or call a lawyer, Marla said they had already contacted my employer about disturbances. And then my phone buzzed with an email from my boss asking if everything was all right at my new address. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't about grass or mailboxes. This was about control and reputation, and how fast a lie can move through a neighborhood when it's wearing a lanyard. That night, I brought the last box in and looked up at the sycamore. There was a small black camera that wasn't there during inspections, angled right at our door, humming like a quiet dare. And I stood under it long enough to feel my heartbeat in my wrists, thinking about every time we pulled in, every time the kitchen light turned off. Who recorded it? Who watched it? Who felt entitled to it? You know what I mean? 3 days later, I turned the corner and nearly parked on my lawn. A moving truck straddled the driveway, amp down. 2 guys muscling a floral sofa toward our front door, while Marla directed them like she was stage managing a high school play. She unfolded a folder with colored tabs and told everyone within earshot that the sale was fraudulent. The property belonged to her family by inheritance. They were reclaiming it. Please step aside. And the movers looked at me with that "we just want to get paid" face. Police came because someone always calls when voices get sharp. On a Tuesday morning, they skimmed her papers, skimmed mine. Said my deed looked valid on its face. If she believed there was fraud, she should take it to court. And Marla's composure cracked. "This is theft," she shouted at me. At the officers at the Sky neighbors, peeking through blinds like we were cable news. And when the truck finally left and quiet fell like dust, I checked the back lip of the mailbox and found a spare key that wasn't ours to hold and guilty in my palm. Which is the kind of thing that moves you from shocked to angry, fast. The fines kept stacking. $300 for the porch bulb's warmth, $450 for a mailbox color. Nobody could point to in any document a threat to suspend trash pickup for non-compliance, and Nora, who never shakes, called me from a hospital storage room, whispering that she'd made charting errors because she couldn't think straight, that she was scared she'd hurt someone. And I heard it. The crack in her voice, the way pressure turns into fear, and fear turns into shame. The next morning, our retired accountant neighbor Calvin knocked with a manila envelope and the gentle tone of a doctor about to level with you. He slid photos of Stewart at a print station. Signature samples laid out like a lesson plan, 3 identical payments to a company called Doc Prep Solutions. Texts between Marla and Stewart, naming their scam the Inheritance Recovery Project, because truth bends when you dress it up. And I felt something harden in me, not rage, exactly, more like purpose. That night, I knocked on Stewart's door. He tried the sad stories first: gambling debt pressure, a wife with a temper. Then he slipped into a practiced confession that ended with him implying I'd manipulated him, which was a neat trick, considering I hadn't asked him to confess to anything. And then Calvin stepped from the sidewalk and read a text where Stewart and Marla planned to blame me if things went south. Harassment, coerced confession. The whole script laid out like a playbill, and you don't often get the blueprint for how someone intends to ruin you. But when you do, the fog lifts. We hired an attorney. Dana Sharp, mind. Sharper legal pad. She pulled the real will from the county. Ruth Benton's, and it specifically excluded Marla and Stewart for financial irresponsibility and manipulative behavior. A handwriting expert broke down the loops and pressure and crossing habits, until even I could see the forgeries. The ink on certain amendments didn't even exist the year Ruth supposedly signed them, which should have ended things. But people who worship control don't stop, because the facts arrive. Marla filed for a restraining order, walked into court with edited audio, where my pauses were moved to make me sound like a threat. And for a second, hearing my own voice butchered like that, I almost doubted myself, but Dana pulled unedited files and body cam footage, and the judge watched edited versus original, edited versus original. And somewhere in the second round, a line in her face hardened. Order, denied, temporary order, granted against Marla instead. And in the hallway, Marla shouted that this was an attack on families, and faith loud enough to make the air hold still. And I stood there, realizing how quickly a bully reaches for a flag when the rulebook stops working. Donna's investigator found property tax appeals Marla had filed for homes she didn't own, including ours. Thousands skimmed through refunds because a friendly clerk pushed forms through light verification inspection reports by a code officer named Daryl, who only found violations where Marla had marked targets. Approved contractors. Billing triple for work no one needed. And if owners couldn't pay, a friendly investor offered a quick buyout. The circle completing like a magic trick, except the rabbit was your house. Nora fainted. After a shift, her supervisor sat her down. She called me from the lot, a voice. Tiny, and that's when I told Dana to file everything. Call everyone I copied neighbors on every document. Calvin booked the community room by the pool, and people realized their isolated headaches were chapters in the same book. And after that, the gear train started moving loud and quick. A judge signed a search warrant. Detectives boxed up binders labeled targets and appeal packets, and contractor network pulled a spiral manual that said, Community Recovery Playbook, like some dystopian franchise. There were spreadsheets with bonus tiers next to initials, texts with a clerk named Patricia about which appeals might slide letterheads printed on a guest room laser that pretended to be law firms, and I slept 3 hours before Dana told me to stay home and sit tight. We parked in an unmarked car, while arrests popped like flashbulbs across the county. Daryl at his desk. Patricia at the counter. a lawyer at a golf club talking about streamlining nuisance claims. And then there was Marla hosting a so-called neighborhood security seminar that was really a recruitment pitch. Folding chairs on a patio, strollers, visors, iced tea, and officers walked through the side gate. Calm as a summer breeze, and I watched her face shift from confidence to irritation, to that animal look that doesn't know where to run, she said. It was religious persecution. She tried the garage, she tried the gate, and when the cuffs clicked, it wasn't triumph, I felt it was quiet. The kind that lets you breathe fully for the first time in weeks. In court, Dana lined up exhibits. The will, the ink analysis, the audio side by side. Calvin's photos of envelope exchanges outside a church. Stewart flipped and described practicing Ruth's signature until his hand remembered what his conscience forgot, the judge read. Charges that felt like names for the weight we'd been carrying. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, harassment, restitution sentence, and the gavel didn't slam. It just ended the paragraph like that. You'd think that's the end. But here's the twist I didn't see coming. And maybe you won't. Like a local blog ran a defense of strict HOAs as guardians of neighborhood integrity, and half the comment section cheered the idea of order, no matter the method the other half wanted to torch every bylaw. And I stood on my porch realizing the real argument wasn't lawns or mailboxes. It was what we owe each other when we live 20 feet apart. Where your porch ends and my standards begin. Who gets to draw that line and enforce it? I'm not anti-rules. I'm pro-decency. I'm pro-neighbors. Who knock to introduce themselves, not to measure your light bulb. I'm pro-signatures. That give life back like the note Nora left. That said she got through an entire shift without errors and came home early to nap. And I'm pro-swings hung from sycamore branches. Once you can look at the bark and not see a lens, you know what I mean? If someone ever tells you that you can't live in your own house, ask them to show the page where it says they decide. And if the page still smells like a laser printer, maybe the rule they love is just a habit. The kind where control dresses up like care. Tell me where you stand is Marla. A one-off villain or a symptom of something bigger? HOAs keep people safe or just keep certain people comfortable. What would you change if you could draw the line yourself? Take your story. Your argument in the comments, Ed. Like if this hit a nerve, share it with the neighbor who needs to hear it. And let's talk about what justice and community really mean on a street like ours.